Hey there, and welcome to StoryTV, the place to be if you want to write a kick-ass novel that you can publish. I'm your host, Jennifer Blanchard. In today's episode, I'm covering a topic that's a big problem for a lot of writers, and that's attachment or being too attached to your original story idea. So what does that mean? So when you come up with a story idea, an inspiration hits you initially. Maybe you read something, or maybe you hear something, or maybe you just experience something that you decide you want to write about. Cool. But what ends up happening for most writers is they just take that idea and they run with it. They sit down, they start writing, and they go with it from there. And sadly, some people take that and then publish it thinking that it's good enough. The big problem. Now you may be wondering, why is it bad to be attached to my original idea? Here's why. Your original idea is just a blip of inspiration. It's not a story in itself, not yet. And the problem is, if you don't take the time to develop it, to really learn who these characters are and what they want, and discover the world that they're going to live in, and figure out what this core story is, if you don't do those things, then you're doing a huge disservice to yourself as a writer and to your story. And you don't want to let that happen. Now, let's take, for example, let's say you have a character that you love, or maybe a scene that you love. Something like that. Now, if you were to just say, no matter what, I'm not going to take this character out, I'm going to just work with it, make it happen, I don't care what I have to do, I'm going to build the story around this character if I have to, I'm not taking this character out. That is a huge problem for you, because maybe the character doesn't work. Maybe this person just has no meaning and no purpose in the story, and it's a waste for them to be there. You can't just put things in a story because you feel like it. They have to be there for a reason. They have to have a mission. They have to move the story forward. And if they don't do that, they're out of here. Kill your darlings. It's not just a phrase. Do it. And if you're not willing to do that, then maybe you should rethink this whole novel writing thing. Because writing a novel isn't just about putting something on paper that you want to put on paper. It's about giving a reader a vicarious experience, something that they want to be part of. And if you're just cramming a character in because you like the person and think they need to be there, or, cramming a scene in because you like the scene and think it needs to be there, that's a problem. And that's going to affect your reader in a big way. So now, doesn't mean you have to take what you have and not use it. If you don't use a character, you could always write them into another story. You could do a short story about that character. You could even take the scene that you like that you're not using anymore and give it away as a deleted scene when you actually publish the story. Kind of like they do on DVDs. Not everything is going to make it into the story, and that's perfectly okay. The idea here is optimization. It's about finding the best pieces to make your story work. That's what you need to be focusing on, not being attached to your idea seed. You need to be open-minded, you need to be willing to make changes, and you need to be willing to get rid of things that are not working. If you can't do that, your story is doomed. So to illustrate what I'm talking about, I thought that I would share an example from the story that I'm working on. So back in 2008, I wrote my first novel. It was the first time I ever wrote a full-length story, and I had no clue what I was doing. So what I ended up with was a draft that was a total disaster. It was a mess. And I tried rewriting it, 2-3 times. I spent time rewriting the whole thing, and I just couldn't make it work. And I got to a point where I realized I can't keep spending time, or wasting time rather, on something that just isn't working. So I took a break, I stepped aside, I put the story away, and thankfully right after that I came across Larry Brooks and his articles about story structure, which changed everything for me. After I studied as much as I could from his site and his books, I basically went back, grabbed the story that I had, and took a look at what pieces were there. Turns out I actually had 2 stories that I was trying to smush together into one story. Big problem. Big problem. But I never would have saw that if it wasn't taking the time to learn what it takes to write a good story. I would have just thought it was good enough, published it, and went on with my life. And you know what? That would have been the worst thing I could have done for my story and for myself as a writer. Thankfully, that didn't happen. Thankfully, I took a break and went to learn what I didn't know yet. And now that I know it and I have more experience, I've actually taken that story, and after separating the pieces out and deciding that it was 2 stories, I chose to focus on one over the other, and I've been working on that one for the last 2 years, and I'm so excited to share that I'm going to be publishing it in the next month or so. And so I'm getting it out there, and the story finally feels good to me. I feel in a good place with it, and I know this never would have happened if I had just run with the original idea seed. Think you might be too attached to your story idea? Here's how to find out. Okay, so you need to ask yourself the following. Am I refusing to remove something from my story even though I know it doesn't work? Am I trying to make something work even though it's really not working? Have I been writing and rewriting and yet getting nowhere? Have I been told by other people that something in my story just isn't working and yet I keep trying to make it work? Are there extraneous characters or scenes in my story that don't do anything to add value or move the story forward? And did I hear myself in any of Jen's examples during this episode? If so, you are probably too attached to your original story idea. Any of that sound like you? If so, here's how to let it go. So you can let go of attachment to your initial idea seed by being more open-minded and willing to make changes. You need to be willing to drop anything that's not working. You need to make it your mission to learn the craft of what it takes to write a kick-ass novel. You need to stop writing your story in a vacuum and get some outside feedback. You need to start planning and developing your stories before you write them. And finally, you need to focus on finding the most optimal way to tell your story. These things will help you release attachment and get you to the story that you're really meant to be writing. I hope this episode helped, and I'd love to know what you think, so go to jenniferblanchard.net and leave your comments now. And if you want even more great tips and information to help you write a kick-ass story that you can publish, plus some extra special stuff that I only give to my email list, be sure to visit jenniferblanchard.net/newsletter to join my email list now. Keep dreaming and keep writing, because the world needs your story, the story that only you can write. Thanks so much for hanging out with me, and I'll catch you next time on StoryTV. Think you might be too attached to yours?